Welcome to the Global Defense War Monthly Panel. We will be discussing the most recent turn of events as Commander-in-Chief and President Donald J. Trump dismantles the deep state shadow government global cabal. We will cover from a military perspective just what is going on behind the scenes, as well as making sense of the most recent events concerning Iran and Israel. I'm John Michael Chambers. While there is still a ways to go yet, it seems to me that evil is beginning to lose its grip in the spiritual battle we are engaged in. This global operation and systemic purification is well underway as we restore our constitutional republic. Our panel today, a returning panel war correspondents, consists of Australia retired Lieutenant Colonel Ricardo Bossie, former Australian Army Special Forces; retired Colonel Charles Sellers, Beirut, Panama, First Gulf War, Colombia, Bosnia, 2 tours in Afghanistan; Michael Jaco, retired veteran with over 24 years in naval special warfare and over 2 years in naval diving and salvage, over 11 years as a contract and direct contract security operative for the U.S. State Department and CIA operations in combat zones. Michael has dedicated a total of 35 years serving the U.S. government in high-risk environments. We also have retired Army Derek Johnson, who's an expert, in my view, on tabulating and covering the Commander-in-Chief Donald J. Trump's laws and orders. And we have returning our good friend from Canada, retired Canadian Infantry Brad Wozny. This is our esteemed panel. I salute you. America salutes you, and I'm sure many folks around this world salute you for your service in the military and your ongoing service as civilians. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here. I'd like to address what I believe are the concerns and confusions of what is on the minds of not only the American people, for sure us here at home, but people all over the world. I shall do far less sharing of my own views here in this episode, so please take your time and provide for our viewers, taking as much time as you need to cover these most critically important questions of the day. These are the 4 subjects we will take on to our audience, so you know where we're heading in the next 2 hours. One is the recent events in Iran and Israel, and we're going to break that down with this panel. Number 2, the dissent from within our movement concerning the actions of our wartime President and Commander-in-Chief Donald J. Trump. I find it astonishing. Number 3, economic and defense repositioning across the globe. What is actually being done, and what are both the positive and negative impact, economically speaking? And then we're going to open up at the end, hopefully time allows, for an open forum for our panel guests to discuss anything in any corner of this universe that you'd like to jump into. The floor would be completely all yours to open up your views from whatever you want to share. So let's begin with Lieutenant Colonel Sellers. I will ask the same question of our panel. Welcome back, sir. It's good to see you again. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Alrighty, so can you highlight from any and perhaps many perspectives of what just took place concerning Israel and Iran beyond the mainstream media headlines and the social media noise? What really just took place and what's been going on with Iran and Israel, and an analysis, if you will, sir, of Commander-in-Chief Donald Trump's handling of the situation?
Okay, and let me set one part of the stage as we talk about it. At the end of last week, around Thursday or so, I was informed by another colleague of mine that there were a number of earthquakes that happened in the region, around 3 of them in Iran, 1 of them in Afghanistan, 1 of them in Pakistan, and I think there was 1 in Russia as well. All of them were at a depth of 6.2 miles, 10 kilometers, which widely is believed is the level of where the DUMBs, the deep underground military bases, are, and the operations that are going on in there. So all of those came out as being 6.2 miles, 10 kilometers deep. That's important, I believe, when you take what happened in Iran into perspective, because I think it's a wider picture than just talking about cross border operations into Iran. My gut feeling, following the strikes that we did on Saturday, I believe it was on the weekend, um, and then President Trump's announcement of what he had done, what he had ordered to be done. My feeling is that he undertook that operation to forestall further larger operations by Israel cross border into Iran. I think by going in there and doing what we did, taking them out, taking out those installations as we did, it really forced, in my mind, it erases almost any reason for Israel to go cross border into Iran again. It just took, to me, it took away the entire reason for that to happen. So I think he forestalled that situation and took decisive action. Um, and it was successful. And I'm not saying that there's not going to be more, because there very well might be more actions. But I think that was one of the underlying causes of that. And it was a what. And again, when you take in the earthquakes into consideration, I think it was a wider scope than just targeting those things in Iran. And you guys welcome to. Let me see how you guys think about it.
Sure. Well, thank you, Colonel. We'll go through the panel. Before I move on, the same question to everybody, I want to ask you, sir, what economic impact, both good or bad, do you think that this move with Iran may hold in store for us? With the oil there and so forth, there seem to be some concerns in the public square about rising prices for us and so forth. Do you have any comments or views, opinions about that?
I'm not an expert in that type of in that area, but I think that this is not what happened over the weekend is not going to hurt us economically. I think in the end it helps us.
Great, excellent. Well, thank you, sir. We'll move on to the panel. We have Lieutenant Colonel Ricardo Bossie from Australia One Party. Same question again. I'll just repeat it to put it fresh. Can you highlight for many and perhaps your analysis, basically, of what just took place in Israel and Iran, and President Trump's analysis of his handling of it, because that's become a controversial issue?
There we go. We're back. Thanks, John. Great to be here. Now, brilliant weekend. Brilliant weekend. It showed at a number of levels different things. First of all, Trump's supremacy in the region, without a doubt. His ability to make things happen the way it's got to happen. So that's the point, the first lesson that the world has taken away. The days of the United States appearing to fumble and lose focus and not use its power has weakened it internationally in the minds of the people. To put it bluntly, this is what the US voted for. He let the US keep the military off the leash, and it puts the lie to years and years of wars, not only in the Middle East, but globally, which could have been put down and ended very, very quickly. So that's the second point. One, Trump's in charge. Two, the US has the capability to keep this planet in check. The only reason it's been out of control is the controlling cabal have wanted it to be so. They need the constant wars, the forever wars, for their own nefarious ends. Thirdly, it demonstrates the high level of control that Trump actually has over the affairs in the world, simply because it's not like Iran woke up and said, wow, you know what, we should try peace and love and goodwill to all men. I mean, it's just laughable to think that the logic of the situation appeals to either the Israelis or the Iranians. As he said, they've been at war for so long that they haven't got a clue what they're doing. That's the sanitized view. So it's a com to the normies that, oh, look, common sense is winning. No, it's not nothing to do with common sense. It's to do with the fact that control of the planet has passed from the black hats to the white hats. And what's happening is you've got the white hats directing black hats. And here's a little insight. There are, and this happened to us on a micro level. we would be approached by, let's say, Masons, and that's just one group of secret societies, constantly pressing us to help liberate them from their obligations, their oaths to the Masons, because they were terrified and they just wanted us to move quickly. And so we use them for various reasons, for our own objectives. And that's exactly what's happening at the international level. There are black hats that wish to free themselves from the evil that is controlling them, and they're now working hand in glove with the white hats. Now, this is at a supranational level and at a national level. You still have the useful idiots at the bottom end that aren't quite aware that that's what's going on. But that's the way that these decisions are coming out so quickly now. Wars are, a strike goes in, people push and shove. There's a bit of theater involved in that between Israel and Iran. That allows Trump to give voice to the frustration of the people, which he did quite eloquently today. And that's it. They're the three big lessons from it. There is more control. The White Hats have more control over the planet than ever before. And we will never see again that embarrassing parade of Toyota Land Cruisers driven by ISIS down the road, as if these, with all due respect, these mental pygmies without the capacity to organize a piss up in a brewery, allegedly running a country and selling oil and producing passports and playing on the international stage like a nation state. That only happened because it was allowed to happen. DJT's in charge, no new sheriff in town. He's pulling the strings behind the scenes, and the show for the normies is being played out in real time, and this is part of the slow reveal. And so as far as we're concerned, it's been a great weekend, and as usual, DJT comes out on top. The US comes out on top, and everybody's more than happy with that. I can tell you back here in Oz, we are over the moon.
Excellent. Good news. Good news all across the world. Same question, the follow-up. Any economic impact concerning the oil? I mean, I think the oil is going to cause a problem for China later, but do you see any economic impact negatively or positively concerning the move in Iran as of recent for us here at home, to the average American paying the bills?
Yep. The downstream effects will all be good. There has to be. This is the necessary precondition for the conduct of the operations. DJT's got to come out on top. The US have got to come out on top. And so, no, whatever impact comes in terms of pure economics, it'll be to the advantage of definitely the US. Certainly other aspects, other countries around the world. The Middle East might have to suffer a bit because they need to feel the pain. So there might be some pushing and shoving in the Middle East, but in the US, no problem at all. And in fact, in Australia, we've seen, and this is part of that slow reveal, we've seen gas and oil prices drop for no apparent reason and no fanfare and no explanation on the mainstream media for some many months now. It's just going down and down and down. And the only reason that is simply because, the oil companies will jack the price up 5-10 cents a litre if somebody sneezes in Kazakhstan. And yet the oil prices are going down. So this is by virtue in terms of addressing the economic issue. Those issues have been revealed, and the unwinding of cabal control has been silent and hidden. And if you pay attention, you'll see it, but there's no fanfare. And so there's a greater level of economic control than the people would understand. To think that the OPEC is still running oil prices now is just plain naive. DJT, White Hat's definitely in control, and they've got control. We know that, but now they're rolling it out slowly. The reveal must be slow because the normies have to have time to process the information and then move ahead. It's inexorable. It will not stop, but it's got to be very measured. But no economic downside for us.
Thank you, sir. Real quick, before we move on to Michael Jaco with the same question. Q, save Israel for last. What does that mean?
So save Israel for last because we're going to, take them out next.
Okay. All right, Mike, we'll come to you in a second. Thanks for that. Go ahead, Ricardo, sir.
Sorry.
Q.
Yeah, that's all right.
It's okay.
No, that's okay. I love to hear from Mike. Mike's a goal. I love hearing from Mike. So anytime you need to
ready for him. But I'd like you to weigh in, Ricardo Bossie, if you will.
Yeah. this is the best com of all, because one of the frustrations is when does this end? When does this end? When does this end? Now, there's a reason why Israel has to be last, but that's for the normies. The big news there is we're getting very, very close now. Now, it's already taken out. We know that Israel's under control, has been for some time. This is like discussing a Poirot murder mystery and pretending that the characters are really murderers, pretending there's actually a body there that needs to be sorted out. And we understand that that's the show. So Israel's under control, like they all are. But the signal here is when Israel is visibly taken out, that's the end of the show. And they have to be last because, let's face it, the Khazars, not the average Israeli, but the Khazari mafia have been running the show. And when they go down, national sovereignty makes a comeback. The people are in control of their destiny. International wars where, and I said this the other day quite directly in colourful Australian language, that we have no interest in Israel nor Palestine, and they can burn in hell for all we care. And it wasn't just a fit of pique, because we have Papua New Guinea to our north. It's an island to our north. The western half of that island is called Irian Jaya. It's controlled by Indonesia, the most populous Muslim nation on the planet, well over 200 million. And the Indonesian Kopassus, that's their special forces, have killed up to 500,000 Irian Jayans over the last many years. And nobody seems to care about them because they're brown. But we have to devote all our attention, our money and everything to this bloody pain in the ass called the Middle East. Well, our view is the Middle East can burn in hell, not in our area of strategic interest. And that's the view that all the nation states have to take on. We have to take responsibility for our nations, our area of strategic interest, and operate in concert with the other nations that have the same view. But this nonsense that the whole world should be focused on Israel, this tiny little bit of dirt. And I can understand the evangelicals believing that God said that Israel has to be protected, and any country that supports Israel be blessed by God. What unmitigated horse feathers? What? Which party are we supposed to support, the Likud or the Labour Party? Which policy it's nonsense. It's childish nonsense. But that's their problem to grow up. We've got the African continent, this massive continent, huge, full of resources and people and opportunity, which we seem to forget about. It's just a mine for the West to dig up and the French to control. So all of this is going to change. National sovereignty is coming back. Israel goes down, and everyone can focus on running the planet in their little corner, from their little corner of the planet, with others, to make sure that moral nation states focus on themselves and then work in concert to, let's say, encourage the less moral countries to play the international game a little better than they have.
One comment real quick. On Saturday.
Sure, go ahead, sir.
Just one comment that's the same subject with what Ricardo's talking about in my mind. When the person playing Benjamin Netanyahu got on the news on Saturday to congratulate DJT on what he had done, I almost laughed, because what in my mind I was thinking about was the big Donald John Trump forefinger punching that guy right in the chest, saying, "You're going to do this, you're going to do what I say, and you're going to say what I tell you to say." That's exactly what I took from that press conference.
Excellent. Thank you. Michael Jaco, Unleashed, Israel for Last. Q, talk to us.
So, yeah, it's definitely going to be saved for last. Now, you go all the way back, 47 years ago to the takeover of Iran by the Muslim extremists. And that just basically was a low point for humanity. MI6, CIA was involved in that. And that's the dark side of that. So the Black Hats, deep state, they had control of Iran. And now they still have a little bit of control, but that's being, taken out of their hands. So you go all the way to Desert One with, Delta guys dying to try and, help the hostages that were, held for 444 days. You had Marine barracks bombed by the extremists, Hezbollah extremists that are funded by Iran. And, hundreds of service members died in that. When I was in Iraq, I saw many people die from Iranian roadside bombs. And, of course, they had Soleimani. Trump took out Soleimani. I was in Afghanistan The same thing, we saw the Iranians coming over and causing hate and discontent. When I was in Pakistan, we saw the same thing. So we saw, like we were just discussing, these dumbs that were obviously attacked, I believe, in Iran, 3 of them at 6.2 or 10 kilometers down, 6.2 miles down. And then in Quetta is one of the main places where the terrorists would go into Afghanistan and then come back into Pakistan. So funded and given, their orders and so forth from Iran. Same thing up in Afghanistan, in Herat. I've been to all these areas. I've seen Iran, involved in all of this. So it is magnificent to see President Trump, send in one of the most incredible missions ever in history, I believe, to do that bombing mission. No, they didn't even launch any missiles at those guys. So it's nice to see that we got a little bit of revenge on that. So it's been a long time. Economically, I think we're going to rocket. I mean, every time we've had some kind of issue in the Middle East, we've seen oil prices skyrocket every single time, going all the way back to Jimmy Carter. So this is a good indication, because we haven't seen that Trump is in control of our economy. And I think this is magnificent. Now, when you look at Israel for last, Netanyahu's being puppeted. He's a deep state boy. That's actually, the White Hats are telling him what to do. Okay, take out Hezbollah. Okay, take out Hamas. Okay, now go over there and take out the deep state in Iran, because they're building nuclear weapons, and we can't have that. So it is magnificent to see all this going down. We all see it. We're trying to relay it to everyone else. I think we're making good effort. I think a lot of people are starting to get it. I know everyone here, we talk the same language. But we're not in direct contact. So that should tell everybody, that from our, viewpoints, each one of us different, each one of us unique. We've had the experience where we can see this and see what's really going on. And I think it's magnificent.
Thank you, Michael. I think it's a rhetorical question, but I'll drop it out there anyway. You've served in the armed forces in various capacities for nearly 4 decades under different commanders in chief. How would you rate President Trump's performance?
The best commander in chief ever, by far. He will go down in history.
Thank you.
As being the best commander in chief by far.
Excellent. Thank you very much. We're excited to come back to you with some other questions. Let's take the same question to Derek Johnson. Now, Derek, I've been following some of your work. Refrain, if you will, for the moment, because we've got this coming up in a second question about the dissension within our movement. So don't go there just yet. But if you wouldn't mind weighing in as well, your analysis of what took place in Iran and Israel, Trump's performance, and Q's Save Israel for Last. Jump in on all that. We'd love to hear your views.
What don't you want me to do? What did you say?
We're gonna hold off on the dissension, the divide and conquer strategy being deployed within our movement. Those that are turning against the president. We'll come to that as a separate dialogue. So hold off on that. Yes.
Oh, you want me to refrain from my Lieutenant Colonel Bossie moment where he tells them to reach in the purse? Okay, I got you. Yeah, okay. All right.
We'll get there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the laws and orders set up perfect, and that's what straight up President Trump has to work with. Straight out the gate on the 2016 campaign trail, he told everybody, never again will we voice to the public what's going on with our military, because if you find out, guess who else finds out? Another time in a report where he was talking to the press, he told them in short words, basically, I don't owe you any explanation what we do with our military and when we decide to strike. You don't need to know that. So Executive Order 12170 has been open with Iran since 1979, a national emergency. They've continued, the Congress, every 2 years. So your bureaucrats. Obama opened, he had Executive Order 13611 with Yemen He had 4 executive orders with Ukraine alone, 3 of those in 1 month alone with Ukraine, and they left all these open. So that's the bureaucracy. So when people say that we can't get involved, yes, we can. But the precedent was set that President Trump said we will not start any foreign wars. So he had Israel start with Iran. He had Russia going to Ukraine. All right. And then he also had Israel going into Yemen as well. And then we come in and start finishing these things off. And just like we're all saying here that he has been fully in control. So you got to go back to the 2017, 2021 capitulations. All right. All those nations that capitulated, there was one that didn't. That was Iran. All right. Now, the others, like Israel, that we're talking about, and then also people like Ukraine and all these others, they're taking their punishment right now. All right. Russia is taking their punishment as well because of the Uranium One deal. All right. So they had to take all their punishment by being smeared, by starting a war with Ukraine and all the stuff they're getting. So it's kind of like all these civilians out there. They love TV shows and movies about Fall Guys and all these strategies where you're watching that. And President Trump's over here saying, you're going to do this, you're going to do that, you're going to do this, and you're going to do that. It's not going to happen to us. And it's resetting everything in so many different facets. Now, you got to go to your Abraham Accords, Israel and UAE. And UAE and Dubai has been a portal right now. Everything that's been going over across in Iran, in Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Turkey, everywhere. UAE has been a portal. I've been watching aircraft in and out of there monthly, weekly, etc. Then you got to go to the start of the Israeli war, October the 7th to the 14th. My good friend Siggy Flicker, she loves it when I rattle these off, but showing people what took place with Israel. All right, in 1 week's time, for the listeners out there, 1 week's time, all of these military aircraft were in Israel in 1 week. So Bulgaria, Romania, Thailand, Japan, New Zealand, Australia, Colombia, Argentina, all of Europe just about. And then you had the United States, you had Russia and Ukraine were in Israel in 1 week's time. So that tells you right there, those are all your nations that had capitulated. Tunisia, Algeria, Nigeria. I mean, we could keep naming them here. Mexico was there. I think El Salvador, Panama. So all these nations were in Israel in 1 week's time. So that shows you also that it's a world operation. They've been in and out of the U.S. too the last 4 years. All those nations I just listed have been on reserve basis. So what President Trump did was take the deep state's tactics, and he said, I'll beat you at your own tactic. All right, I'll beat you at your own laws and orders. That's why you can find the reserve components and a few other things in our joint publications like 3-16 and a few others with continuity government as well. So that's what you're seeing there. So Iran didn't take that big deal to stand down. All right. So what do we have to do? Take care of that. I think what's so funny about all this too is that we actually have liberals now who are supporting a nation that has nuclear facilities, or they did have them. Right. That's kind of hilarious that we have liberals who are taking up for that. So it shows you what's flipped there. The Obama deal is also going to be brought back into the limelight. All right. This great deal that he made was supposed to be 3.67% enrichment, and we were at 83.7, which out of 90%. I'm pretty sure, last I checked, even though I escaped Alabama with your average high school math, I'm pretty sure 83.7 is a lot closer to 90 than 3.67 is. So there's that. So that deal was trash, and President Trump started trashing it from day one, right? And remember all the liberals? Oh, they went stir crazy because Obama was their hero. Well, there's that. Then 2 more points. Iran, the Defense Intelligence Agency put out a publication you can go look up to this day in 2019, all about the Iranian military power. Guess what it has in there? Jaco, let me hold you back, buddy. Let me hold you back. What's it got in there? Underground facilities. All right. So all those people that call those conspiracy theorists, here we are. We're sitting here with a full bird colonel who's 1 step away from a general. We have a lieutenant colonel who's not far from it. We have a Navy SEAL here who is an American badass. All right. They're all badasses. But we have this. There's your titles that you need, right? When people say, well, dear Johnson and Brad, you're not of this. Here you go right here. Here they are right here. All right. We have underground facilities. They are not whatsoever remotely close to a conspiracy theory. Also, President Trump is the first president to establish a strategy for subterranean warfare. All right, and then also you have your Israeli. It was a started teaching it at our war colleges also in 2019, and today's the anniversary, June 24, 2018, of the first article that hit military.com saying that our 26 of 31 brigades of the Army are going to be training for subterranean warfare. For our next wars will be in mega cities, not inside them, but beneath them. That's subterranean warfare. All right, President Trump's the first to establish that. And then this specific paper that you can go read and look up, Shaping the Deep Fight, the Future Conflict, from our war colleges that they were teaching, it talks about Hamas, Egypt, and Gaza cross-border operations way back in 2019, and that's what we've been in right the last 2 or 3 years with Egypt and Hamas, all right, and Egypt and Gaza. So there's that. Yemen, that's your Houthis, that's Iranian right there, straight up ties in with that, all right. And then also, really quick, that President Trump just put it out today. He put the report out, the letter to the Senate and the House. He put his letter in, all right. That is Title 50, Chapter 33, Section 1543, letter A. That's the report that he has to report no later than 48 hours after use of military. So there's the report there. And then also that is under Title 50, Chapter 33, Section 1550, that a Democratic House Representatives now, House Representatives, Democratic House introduced under President Trump December the 20th, 2019. So when you see Bernie Sanders and Jasmine Crockett, that's theater, but to the normal people, they think it's real when they're saying that's Congress who declares the war. Congress declared that war December the 20th, 2019.
Wow, thank you, Derek. One quick question before we move on to Brad. Care to comment on Q, Save Israel for Last? We've heard from the other panel members. Any comments about that? Any views about what that means? A lot of people are curious. I post it quite often on my media, and I'm recognizing that people take a lot of different views about that. What's your view of that?
Well, it also still ties into Iran as well, because for the last 45 years, I mean, this is all it's been about is Israel this, Israel that, Israel this, Israel that. I mean, everything is stemmed around that, right? So you go to your 2019 Indo-Pacific Agreement where President Trump said every nation will be a sovereign nation on their own, like Lieutenant Colonel was talking about, and the sovereignty and every nation defending for themselves. And this is a bureaucrat game that they set up all these years, and they set up all these their tactics, right? And you saw President Trump today when he dropped the F-bomb, which was epic. But what that shows guys like me, especially lower enlisted guys, even though I did have my packet ready for WOC, warrant officer, for people that don't know what that means, they all know. But for guys like me, when a commander when he's a good commander from the start, meaning right from the beginning. Same thing when my dad raised me as a boy. He said, if you're doing what's right from the beginning, you don't have to worry about anything else, right? So when a good commander is being a good commander, right, he don't care who you are, what you are, anything like that. He's going to take up and he's going to say whatever. If it's his own child and they do wrong, he's going to call them out and he's going to say, you were wrong, you were this. Today, he said what? He said, Israel, I'm not happy with Israel either. All right. So he's alluding to all the stuff that Q's talking about and all these things. So like Lieutenant Colonel Bossie was saying, to the average Israeli or the average, like even Siggy Flicker, a friend of mine who was born in a bomb shelter in the 6-Day War. All right. You have to be delicate with some, but overall, the bureaucratic games that was stemmed around Iran and Israel and all the Middle East, that they had their little chess games on their own, has nothing to do with Commander-in-Chief President Trump, wartime President Trump. This is a completely different operation, and it's putting a stop to all this, basically, for lack of better words, BS that's been going on in the Middle East for all these years. That, again, when everybody's taking care of themselves, everything will take care of it. Same thing with the economic question. That economic question stems to the 2019 Indo-Pacific and all the resetting of the currencies and all these things that's taking place. That's already happened. It's just a matter of it setting in now.
Thanks, Derek. Save Israel for last. It seems to me that last is rapidly approaching. Brad, thank you for your patience. You've had the opportunity to listen to the entire panel. Your views are equally important. Please share with us your analysis of Iran, Israel, and the subjects that we've discussed within the realms of this first question. We've got no audio, sir. We got you now.
I've been hanging out with Rick so much, I forget that when I'm on mute on our shows. It's an honor to be here with everybody. So thanks again, John. I fully support what all these amazing warriors have said so far. I think, from a classification standpoint, when people are hearing about Iran and the bad and the regime, it's kind of like saying that, all Canadians in the regime, those are the terrorists. When you really have like a microcosm of that, it happens to be the ones who are in charge that are the woke pedophile Satanists, right? And that's what you can apply to the regime in Iran going back to 1979. There are Christians in Iran. There is Cyrus Force, which is a registered organization in the United States of America. The heads of it met with Secretary Marco Rubio just prior to being secretary in October 2024, last year in Boca Raton, and had a great meeting because what they want to do is reset and go back to the original constitution. Everybody has to remember that Iran is a massive country, and the history that goes back there to Cyrus the Great, who overthrew the Babylonians. So we have roughly a 5-decade, half-century period of time of this ruler who is also listed in the Bible, in Scripture, for overthrowing the Babylonians. And who were the Babylonians? Those were the cross-dressing, satanic crazies, right? The terrorists terrorizing people, would take boy brides and whatnot. And we see all that playing out today. So once the deep state infrastructure has been removed from that country and the rest of the Middle East, I think that's where we can really move forward in partnership from an economic standpoint. And then obviously President Trump, the White Hats, and his capitulation tour have set up the strategic military support network so that we can have that peace and have that continued strength. And from that standpoint, too, I would really embrace the uplifting and bringing back the history which has been hidden and destroyed from all of humanity throughout all of the ages, because once we do that, we have a greater comprehension of why we should all coexist together on this beautiful planet and celebrate our unique differences as long as it follows, sovereignty, right? Common law, divine natural law all across the board. That's where I stand with this right now. And if you're taking out multiple DUMs at 6.2 miles under the ground simultaneously in multiple countries, if that isn't a calm right there where everybody can go fact check that on USGS and check that out for yourselves too, and momentarily, they're collapsing those systems and trapping in those terrorists so that you can abolish those networks, which run all around the world. But obviously, we've got this focal point that we need to pull out the satanic deep state so that we can have that peace, love, freedom, and harmony eventually. I'm not going hippie style here, but eventually, so that we'd all come together and we can enjoy our families and look 20 generations out on this planet and do things that shepherd in absolute freedom and enjoyment for all of mankind.
Great analysis. Thank you. And I, of course, love your broadening vision into the future and the space that takes on. That's
you look at
something
one
for
more
another
thing
show.
if I may.
Sure.
I'm sorry, John, to step on you. One more thing, if I may. You look at 1979, Jimmy Carter and what he did. That's when they brought in the new Iran constitution, the installment of the Ayatollah, the regime. And when they say it's been amended once and then twice, 1989 and whatever the other time was, who really amended it, right? At the end of a pistol? Or you have a gun to your head or a sword to your wife's throat, it was amended. There was no voting at that point in time. There are two men on this panel right now, Colonel Sellers, Delta Force, retired deputy commander, and Michael Jaco, former SEAL Team 6 DevGru. And as SEAL Team 6 was founded as a result of what happened to the Delta Force commandos back then, Commander Marchenko was in the Pentagon and watched how that happened. So here we have this history where President Trump, as a master chess player, is literally, we're not talking 5D chess here at the moment, but how he's weaving this all back together to come full cycle, full circle and put it out there on a silver platter for the public to see the absolute truth, and then giving them all of the free reign to go out publicly for themselves and find this information and resources online through the likes of some of these gentlemen, what they've been sharing here. Thank you.
Brilliant analysis. Thank you, Brad. We're going to go back to the top of the panel and raise our second question in this episode to Lieutenant Colonel Sellers. The backlash against Donald J. Trump from within our movement is astonishing to me. And I'm talking about the so-called MAGA Trump supporters, Republicans, rhinos. Then there are the notable names, and I will put it out there because it's a matter of public record what they've stated prior to the recent events: Tucker Carlson, Alex Jones, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Candace Owens, to name a few, which I, for one, am very disappointed in. What does this tell us, sir? What are your views of this? Is this productive journalism within the Patriot movement and at some of the big names I just mentioned, or is this somewhat disruptive to our war efforts?
I don't think it's. I actually don't think it's disruptive. I think it's smoking out the rhinos, smoking out the false conservatives, who are basically just posers, and I think that's going to be nothing but good for the overall effort, is to call these people out and identify them, because just because they say that they're conservatives doesn't mean that they're not wolves in sheep's clothing.
Great point. Smoke out operation, as our friend Scott McKay talks about. People just sort of expose themselves by their quick reactions. You care to elaborate any further on that, Lieutenant Sellers?
I think it might go with this, but all of that rioting and stuff that happened in LA, that and all of that was part of a wider plan. There were supposed to be a lot of other riots that happened in the country. I don't know exactly what the technical means are that we use, but I know that we have them. We have technical means of engaging and preventing certain things from happening. And there might be help from other places as well, that forestalled the actions that were supposed to happen in all those other cities. LA happened. Trump responded with appropriate force and squashed that thing, just like he was supposed to do. I think that was just the first shot in the major battle, which includes the cross-border stuff into Iran that he pulled off just shortly after that. I believe it's all tied together, and that we managed through technical means and a lot of good cooperation amongst each other to squash what was supposed to happen in those other cities. So, that was the sign. LA was the sign of what's coming, and I think Trump handled it brilliantly. Both LA, and then think about it. It was only a week later we're going cross-border and knocking out things that needed to be knocked out in Iran, putting Israel back in its place. And don't forget about Israel. One of the very first operations that Israel did as a brand new country, 6 years old, in 1954, was called Operation Susanna. It was an operation by Mossad that was going to infiltrate into Egypt and kill multiple U.S. and British diplomats in Egypt. It got smoked out and squashed, and it never happened. But that was 6 years after Israel became a country. So this is a long history of having problems with this same situation to me. And just go back in time. Just go back. 95. What was the thing? The thing that they kept telling us when I went into Squadron Command in 95 was that Iran is 3 weeks away from a bomb. 95, they were saying that. And it's happened repeatedly over and over. Every time, it all ends up being, oh God, Iran is 3 weeks from a bomb. They said it last weekend. They said that on mainstream media last weekend, that we had to do that because Iran was 3 weeks away from a bomb. I just throw that out because if you pay attention, history repeats itself a lot.
Sure looks that way. Great information. Thank you, sir. We'll move the same question over to Lieutenant Colonel Bossie. We're talking about the divide and conquer strategy, if you want to say, but those that have turned against the president just prior to the moves he made. What's your view of that? Again, productive journalism, is it disruptive to the movement? How would you like to weigh in on this or related subjects, sir?
I'd suggest that this is actually white hat controlled op, and it has a number of objectives to achieve. Firstly, as Colonel Sellers said, it's to smoke out the rhinos. But that's theatre for the normies, because anybody that's paying attention knows exactly who the rhinos are.
Right.
So that's point number one. So the white hats are telling. Now, here's the interesting part from my take. There are a number of black hats, as I said, who have been trying to escape their obligations to evil, and they are now cooperating with the white hats. So you got white hats telling black hats, the black hats who want to run are now telling the useful idiots beneath them what to do, because they're good at following orders. They're not very clever, they're not very imaginative, but they will do what they are told. That's why we've seen this cringeworthy behavior by the Democrats. They're under instructions to do dumb things as if it's going to have an impact. All it does is embarrass them and embarrass their supporters. And so white hats telling the black hats who have turned, the rhinos are being revealed. That's for the normies. But what it also does is it does help smoke out the lower level black hats that still think they run the planet, they run the show. Because when you think of the bureaucracy, just the bureaucracy in Washington, they have to be revealed. They have to be revealed publicly. And the last important point is this is giving voice to the obvious pushback that you would expect from a strong-willed president like Donald Trump. And so you've got to give those complainers a voice. And then the voice is out there. You've got all these rhinos shaking their fist at DJT and all the other people joining the bandwagon, and watch them get crushed mercilessly. It's the way you fight wars. It was extreme violence followed by great compassion. But you don't turn up with the compassion until they are on their knees begging forgiveness. And that's how real wars are fought. And so you're dragging them out. We're revealing for the normies. We're revealing for everybody else. But this is to be absolutely expected. And it's a healthy cleansing, a flushing of the emotions, because the crazies out there on the left, and they are certifiable lunatics, need to actually see everything collapse, and they'll just disappear back under their rocks from whence they came. But this is a necessary and important move. It would have been flawed not to have given voice to the complainers. It would have been flawed not to take this action. But the key point, as I said, is my read is that the white hats are controlling the turncoat black hats, who are now forcing the other black hats to do their bidding. So this is magnificent warfare.
Fascinating how you broke that down in terms of the various levels of awareness and different sectors of the population, for lack of a better word, and how effective the operation is, being able to effectively communicate what they need to each one of these. It's fantastic. We'll bring the same question over to Michael Jaco. Michael, is this productive journalism, what we've heard from Tucker and Candace and others, and the dissension within our own movement to challenge, the war and the narrative, or has it been disruptive or positive to the movement? How would you like to weigh in?
I think it's productive that we, root them out. And, I agree with that. It's different levels, though. I think some of them have infiltrated our movement on purpose, and they're black hats, waiting for the right time to really spread, disinformation, gaining our trust. And then there's some that are, kind of borderline. They just not quite, they don't know what's really going on, and they just leap on something and they talk about it, and they really don't know what they're talking about. So I don't give them too much of a, I don't see any problem with those people. And then there's some that are just, they latch on to any narrative and explode it. If they see a group of people that are anti-Trump, and we see a lot of this, this happening throughout the last 8 years that Trump's been since he first came in. They'll see something that Trump did, and then they'll just latch onto it and they'll just tear it up, and then they'll just fade back, and everybody will forget about them, and then they'll come back in and go with the new narrative that everybody loves, and so there's people like that. So there's different levels of this. It's just more of exposure for those people. I think that in the long run, those of us that have been consistent, that have been giving out the information that everybody sees as legitimate, we carry this thing forward. And I've seen this from people in chats and so forth. They see a lot of these people that are the naysayers and so forth. They see through the game. At this point, we've gotten really smart about this. So yeah, it's a great disclosure. And as we move forward, we're going to continue to see more of it. We're not done yet. We got a lot more cleaning up to do.
I think that's a real important point. Where we're heading now, you might be right. We're just the tip of the iceberg of those mechanics. Fantastic. All right. So the same question to Derek Johnson. Derek, how would you like to respond to some of the prominent voices that have spoken out against the president prior to the recent successful actions in Iran and Israel? How would you like to respond to some of their comments, as well as the MAGA movement that has been, to some extent, splintered, at least temporarily? Disruptive, productive journalism. What's your take on all this?
Well, I'm in agreement with Jaco heavily. Not that I'm not with everybody else, but I think it has variables naturally because it depends on who is who, right? And there's not ways for all of us to know who are operating with the black hats back here, who's getting paid off yet. To me, you can kind of tell by their language and what they do display out there. But the ones like that are just getting lucky, or maybe they blew up on social media. We are in the social media world. I mean, I'm here as a product of social media as well. So it's good when it's good. It's bad when it's bad. The way I tend to look at it the most, though, is it stinks to have to say as a veteran, because it sounds like you use that every time as a crutch when you are one. But I say that for one reason, is when you are a veteran and you serve for the right reasons, right? You went in for all the right reasons. You serve for the right reasons. You don't serve for yourself. You serve for your nation, and you also serve for your brothers and sisters around you. So I look at it kind of like this. This is a declared war. There's absolute, you can't deny it once you know the language, the verbiage, the terminology, etc. You cannot deny that if you're willing to read that, study that. So some of these people have said, well, it's okay for me to challenge the president. No, you're not challenging a president. You're challenging a supreme commander, because he actually, the whole setup is a whole resemblance of Eisenhower. All right. So what is taking place right now is a lot bigger than just the presidency. So to me, like if there are authentic, legit people, you named a few, like Candace Owens, who's sitting there saying, don't take unlawful orders. You're not even been in the military. You don't even probably know what a lawful order is or an unlawful. Therefore, you need to know the laws. But if you are if you claim to be MAGA this whole time, conservative, Republican, patriot, whatever you want to claim, then you wouldn't be even talking about that. So when you think about a veteran, my grandfather, my dad, of course, I still have my father living. My uncle was Air Force veteran. My dad was Air Force. My grandpa was Army. My great grandfather was Army Air Corps that became the Air Force. But I live for them, and I'm basically living through them as well. And then all those memorial graves that we have all over this nation who cannot talk anymore. And right before I went viral, one of my former sergeants told me, he's like, man, you have a gift of communication, and you have a unique gift and a unique personality. And he was like, what you need to do, he said, I'm not telling you what you need to do, but what you should do is try to find a way to use your gift and live through them and honor our brothers and sisters that way, all the fallen, right? Because they can't speak anymore. And when there is a defined war, but it's an unconventional war, it's not your traditional war, that's why it's using a lot of special operation tactics, then the only people who need to be talking on the forefront are the people who know the laws, the orders that are currently in place, and perspectives on that to lead people through. Because as Brad knows, and it's I once people get to know me, I'm not bragging, but Brad knows this well, and everybody else on this panel. But my manager and management, they receive emails and texts and calls. I mean, there's been over 5,000 people who have not committed suicide because of what's been given to them. That's the ultimate goal. My goal is, and everybody's goal here, I do believe, if you're looking at goals and everything, when you're in the military, you don't worry about who's this and who's that and who's this. We're going to fight for you. That way, no one tries to take your right away, right? And so when you look at the bigger picture of what's going on right now, we don't want anybody in fear right now. We don't want anybody fretting right now. We don't need people doubting right now. We need people who are loyal, who are strong, courageous, to stand up, know what's going on. So I think there's variables out there. I mean, like the Candace Owens and people like that. A lot of these people blew up and they have a social media. And then what did they do? They may have gotten compromised. They may have been bought out, or they just may be just thinking that they know and don't really know, and they latch on to something. And so their own demise. What's going to be interesting to see personally is like this. President Trump played all these people for fools for 12 days. 12 days, right? This has been an operation clearly outlined for 9 years right now as we speak. 9 years in laws and orders. All right. And all these people who jumped ship in just 12 days' time, there's an old George Strait song. I wish it was mine because then that way I can promote my own music here. But there's an old George Strait song about 15 years going up for one short night of sin. So, like, it's talking about a married couple. They were married 15 years, but one night ruined it all. All right. So all these rhinos, if they really are true patriots or thought they were true, and they went and spoke against Commander-in-Chief President Donald John Trump this past week, they just wrote their own ticket for their own demise and didn't have to, all right, if they knew what they're supposed to know. So you'll see me, I will, I've been lightening up this week because I'm like, if you only knew all these laws and orders here that are all public, it's not secretive, it's not classified, you wouldn't look like it.
Derek, you still with us, Derek? We got you. We didn't lose anything there. You froze for a second.
Yeah, I lost it.
First off, I want to say thank you for your heartfelt story of your family and your dedication to those that have served. You've raised some great points, particularly at the end there, that I want to commend you for and thank you for. I want to close out this line of questioning. We'll go over to Brad with this. Okay, along the lines of the attacks that the president is probably just going like this, like a mosquito, but we're having to witness it. People will say he's acted unconstitutionally, beyond the law, the rules and the laws and the Constitution, that he's a king and a dictator and so forth and so on. You've called him a supreme commander. Can you define supreme commander and then debunk one last time briefly that the president acted within the laws and orders, of which you, in my opinion, are an expert in connecting the dots on? And let's put this to bed for everybody listening, please. We've lost Derek. Me? Well,
no,
Derek. Yes, you're.
I'm making sure. Well, okay, I was making sure. I thought you said Brad for a moment there, and I'm like, okay, well, Brad does.
We're gonna go over to Brad.
Yeah. Well, the other real quick thing about my family is this. I didn't mean to as a bragging point on my family. What I meant, anybody who is disgracing the United States military right now, I look at it like that. It's a disgrace to all of the fallen and all of those who are in memorial graves who cannot speak. So, I have my own family who are in graves right now that served. And I look at it that way, is that you're desecrating their grave when you speak against United States military. That's the way I look at it. Now, going over to the Supreme Commander role, the reason why I say that is this. Naturally, anybody who's saying it's unconstitutional right now, first off, you need to know what the Constitution actually does and says before you can even say it's constitutional or unconstitutional. And so many people in America have been diluted and they've been purposely brainwashed on education on a man-made system with a degree that's a man-made system and a man-made tier system where they tell you, here's where you're going to start out and here's how you're going to go like this. and you never ever get ahead because it's all taxed to hell and back. So all these people who think they're educated, they're not educated on that. It could even be a general, more likely than not, but it could be a full bird colonel or a colonel. If they don't know what's in laws and orders, current and vote laws and orders, it could be a colonel, it could be a general, it could be a lawyer, it could be anybody. If they don't know what's in current laws and orders right now, they can be just as oblivious as the lowest level imbecile on the planet, whoever that may be. All right, mainly liberals, but anyway, that's just me right now. But a supreme commander, what Eisenhower was, and I hate calling him by his name, I always say that first, but then President Eisenhower was a supreme commander. All right, President Eisenhower was one who established this thing called a continuity government, but also what coincides with a continuity government is a presidential emergency action document. There's 4 ways that military pairs with federal. That's executive orders, proclamations, national emergencies, treaties. The way that President Eisenhower in that time period established those as prescribed by the law, which is very key, prescribed by the law, the prescription, all right, was when you invoke a COG, well, there's these presidential emergency action documents that are there, which are classified, they're draft classified, but they're also pre-planned, meaning we know what's going on and we're already prepared for this over here. All right, so when President Trump invoked the continuity government, that means it was already pre-planned and they already knew what was coming. And they're trying to keep everybody out in the civilian sector calm, keep everybody distracted if they have to with a distraction piece. That's why some of these things are distraction pieces. Some are, some aren't. So it put him in a whole other category. The other thing that proves it, there's no way on God's green earth that one man, an outsider, never a politician, was able to go to all these nations and make them listen to him. There is no way without a bunch of men like you see right here on this panel behind him saying, you're going to do this, or we're going to expose you to the world, or whatever it is they had on all these nations. All right. A lot of these nations wanted to be a part of it, first off. All right. But then you have strength in numbers. So whatever nations came on board with all our generals and all our colonels and all our secret military, then they were able to go around like Roosevelt with that soft voice and that big stick and say, all right, if you don't do this, this is what's going to happen to you. All hell's going to rain down on you, like President Trump told Iran. He said, that ain't even the tip of the iceberg, what we can bring to you. If you want it, you got it. All right, so a supreme commander, meaning like he goes into this supreme command. He is the supreme commander. Everything he says goes, because he was willing to put his name and face and image on this. He didn't write all these laws and orders. He didn't write this strategic plan. He didn't write these special operations. But he is a brilliant man, and also you can tell that by this little thing right here. Some of these fellas probably know what this is, probably don't want to insult them here, but we know that a lot of these fellas here know exactly what that is, right? Well, President Trump, every meeting, every event, you see him just like this, and I always put it right here, and he's always just like this. Even in the Diddy meeting, when you see the picture of him with Diddy, he's sitting there doing that just right there. So all these liberals out there calling him a pedophile, if they only knew what tip of the spear actually meant, that this has been planned a long time. All right. And there's no way that this man walked in where he went in to the almighty deep swamp, the bureaucrat full of doo-doo. I'll refrain from words that my mama don't like for a moment, but full of doo-doo. There's no way he walked in there and did exactly what he did, not only to DC, but around the world. All right, so that makes him a supreme commander. Not only that, but the laws and the orders which set him up in a military government, military occupation, continuity government, which is a government in exile, a puppet state, puppet government. All these tactics that were used in the World War II era have been used again, slightly different because it's a whole different field and a whole different operation, but that's what's been used, and it's all in laws and orders.
Thank you, Derek. Brad, thanks again for your patience. Weigh in on productive, disruptive, the dissension within our movement, everything you've been listening to. How would you like to, what's your perspective of this? You've been muted. We have no sound.
Second
Okay.
time's a charm, right? That's how it counted
Yes.
in Canada with our math, right? Kilometers, not miles, John. But it's absolutely awesome. It truly is. It's freaking fantastic. And you just sit back and you laugh and laugh and laugh. And what also you see, if you believe that there is a white hat alliance and there is a Q for which President Trump has been acknowledging Q drops like crazy over these last few weeks, and that is escalating, then wouldn't the Tucker Carlsons and the Alex Joneses of the world be under that control? I mean, it's interesting to see how they go from a Sean Ryan show to a Tucker or an Alex Jones and whatnot. And it just makes the rounds depending on what then eventually comes out from some of the comms of the White House and Scavino. So that's a perfect clue for everybody there if you just typical pattern analysis. When you go back to wartime commander in chief, remember the quote that President Trump said to the reporter when he got off Air Force One in Italy for the Vatican for the so-called funeral and the installation of Gary Sinise, or Pope Leo, excuse me. I run the country and I run the world. He said that full on. And that's really amazing. And we've mentioned what's going on with Israel and Q again, and to bring that back full circle here, saving Israel for last. If you look at 1947, Lester B. Pearson helped found the United Nations, right? And what did they do up in Toronto? YYZ. They gave him the airport. Lester B. Pearson coming to Toronto, Canada. 1948, they established Israel as a country. In 1949, Mossad. So we just heard what Mossad was doing 6 years later to Americans and British, at least with the operation, to literally murder them. So we know that as well, with the Rothschilds sitting there on analog TV back in the 70s, bragging about the fact that they set up the state of Israel, which is kind of like a pit viper for the Khazarian mafia, bloodlines of Cain, satanic rituals. And unbeknownst to the majority of us in the world, and likely almost all of the citizens, the good people of Israel, unknowingly to them, like they had it with Canada, like we've had it in America and all around the world in Australia, that it was a setup to help enslave everybody and to follow and do thy bidding. And I'd also like to bring it back to anybody to do, we talk powder analysis. We have a panel here of not only military experts, combat veterans who have been around things that go boom. So I would kind of ask the combat veterans here, if I had a bunker buster bomb and I had enriched uranium and I put the two together, what would happen? We would not see, those parts of the desert for what, a good 100 years or a few thousand years. We're not seeing that in Pakistan, Afghanistan, that specific aspect and part of Russia, nor Iran right now. So what are people watching? Where did the deductive reasoning go? And we've got to get back to our creativity genius. And I'll end it on this, right? As NASA published a study, and I've talked about it a number of years ago in my previous business, that the creativity genius of all of us were born with it. And over the course of the indoctrination patterns up to the age of 38, we lost as a human civilization in our Western nations the creativity level to 98% because they're being put in a box. And we are born, think of this, in a cradle or a crib, and we are buried often in a casket. So we're born in a box, they indoctrinate you in a box, you drive a box with 4 tires, we're talking on a box, this is a box that we communicate on. So they have these spheres of influence across all of our generations. And what President Trump, the White Hats have been doing with this special operation and why he's a wartime commander in chief, which means that Constitution was suspended. Does everybody remember that? Derek and I have talked about it on many shows. He's talked about it on all the shows with these men here and yourself, John, right? Then who would not have the authority to be the supreme leader, the supreme commander, and the wartime commander in chief, as he even says so. And by law, he certainly is that amazing man.
Thank you very much, Brad. I appreciate you weighing in. And we're going to take our final question to the panel, going back around. This will be a 2-part question. First, addressing geopolitics, then the economy. Beginning with geopolitics, describe, if you will, we're going to kick it off with Lieutenant Colonel Sellers. Beginning with geopolitics, describe, if you will, please, the realignment of the relationships that we've been touching on here with nations as undoubtedly things are changing and seemingly rapidly. Who are our friends? Who are our enemies? We're learning a lot about Israel here. Which nations may present the biggest obstacles to attaining fair global trade and peace in this world?
I think, well, we talked about Israel ad nauseum, but that's one of the big problems, I believe. I don't know. It seems like the European countries could be stumbling blocks just because of the liberalism and stuff that goes on in some of those countries. I believe. I don't think it's going to be as much of a problem in the Western Hemisphere here. That's just my take. I'm not an expert on that, but that's my take on it. Israel is an issue. Israel is going to be an issue for a while, and I hate that we keep going back to it, but Israel is going to be the last. And that I totally believe that. And again, I think that's again an example of what happened this weekend. Is that now that the actions that we took in Iran and other people that were helping us do it, all of a sudden you have a shining spotlight on one country, Israel, that's left out there in the open. And I think it all made perfect sense what happened there.
Yeah, it sounds to me, what's coming to my mind is a big elephant in a room. And that elephant has been and is Israel, and it is being addressed right now, as you're indicating. Follow-up question with you, Lieutenant Sellers, and then we'll go through the panel on this. Again, it's our third question and final question. I'm going to throw out some bullets first. And I realize this panel is not expert in the economic arena, but I know you gentlemen, your insights will be valuable to those listening. I'm going to throw out some bullets of what I see happening under the label of all things economic to set the stage and the big picture. And the reason I'm doing this, tying into the geopolitical landscape, is because for obvious reasons, that'll change trade, tariffs, policy, manufacturing, and how we interact with one another, who we're going to be working with properly, and who's going to be isolated or an obstacle. So here we go. There's a currency supremacy war. Central banks are buying gold as much as they can get. Silver is on the rise. There's the cliffhanger of the Fort Knox audit that they dropped out there a while ago. There's the central bank digital currency, which is encroaching very fast on page 2,000 of all the documents we've signed at the big banks. That's not good for us, of which President Trump is not in support of the central bank digital currency, yet the president has stated we will be the crypto capital of the world. Where are we heading currency-wise? And we've seen, I realize it's a big setup, but we've seen, in my opinion, the successful results of President Trump's tariffs, which might translate to his external revenue service. Will the IRS and Fed be around as we know it somewhere down the line in this 4-year term? And lastly, Jerome Powell has not lowered rates. The Federal Reserve seems to be in its standard modus operandi, which has hurted the United States. And don't take my word for it. This is a direct quote from a post from President Trump just a few days ago. Quote, "Too late. Jerome Powell is costing our country hundreds of billions of dollars. He is truly one of the dumbest and most destructive people in the government, and the Fed board is complicit. Europe has had 10 cuts. We have had none. We should be 2.5 points lower and save billions on all of Biden's short-term debt. We have low inflation. Too late's an American disgrace." Also, we hear the terms Nassara Gassara for how many years now? I, for one, do not recall President Trump nor Dan Scavino ever using such terms. Maybe I can stand corrected on that. And lastly, our good friend Juan O'Savin, whom I speak with regularly, in fact, recording a show this Friday, Juan talked about a bond collapse emanating from Japan that will be systemic and will cause some severe damage before things get fixed. Having stated all that, now I realize it's a lot, but it affects every human being on this planet, not just those with assets, but anyone who deals in a currency to stay alive. How do I turn this into a question? I guess we're on Lieutenant Colonel Sellers, and we'll move the two questions over to Ricardo in a moment. Do you care to comment on that hodgepodge of economic woes, transitions, and concerns off the heels of the geopolitical discussion we just had?
Well, the first one I would say is, I mean, I definitely listen to when we need. I mean, we do need to change from the fiat dollar that we have nowadays into hardback currency, I believe. And to that end, several years ago, Michelle and I got rid of everything we had in stocks or any of that stuff, and all of it we have it all in silver right now, and I mean that's basically we made that decision, and I think it was the right decision. And I think it's gonna turn out to show that it was the right decision down the line. The other thing I would say is that we've been talking a lot about President Trump and some of his hard decisions that he's making in the geopolitical arena and everything. But remember where his skill set and expertise is. It's in the economic side as a businessman. And so when he talks about things like you were talking about, John, I think it'd be very wise that we listen because he knows what the hell he's talking about.
Good advice. I agree completely. Thank you. Lieutenant Colonel Ricardo Bossie, I won't read the whole question again. I think you got it. I'll just summarize it out. What's your view of the rapidly changing geopolitical relations, who's friends, who's enemies, and then any countries that you would identify as the biggest obstacles to attaining world peace and good fair trade around the world? And then lastly, your comment on the big picture of the economy that I just spoke about with Lieutenant Colonel Sellers.
Yep, thanks, John. Okay, geopolitics. Who the challenges? The challenges will be not the status quo. So the status quo is completely unacceptable. We cannot allow the world to continue in accordance with what has been standard for the last 50, 60, 70 years. It must change because that was under the control of the cabal. So there are certain preconditions that have to be met. So preliminary operations, we call them in the military, before we can really move forward. So the focus will be on national borders, national interest, rather than international borders and international interests, which is a cover story for sticking your nose into areas that it shouldn't be there. That doesn't mean that we don't have a community of nations type responsibility for the globe. We do, but we've been set up. So the preconditions are this: national borders have to be reestablished, national interests have to be reestablished. Part of those preliminary operations include, for example, repatriation of the forced migration, this invasion by migration that has cursed mainly Europe and the UK, Great Britain, not Great Britain, but the UK. That precondition must be established. They've got to go home and rebuild their own countries because France has lost, England has lost. The rules have to change. England for the English, France for the French, and Africa for the Africans. So this is necessary. It's not unpleasant, it's not unrealistic, and it's very fair because the nature of war has changed. Before it was men in uniforms with guns, and now it's economic, it's migration, it's total war. We know that. So we have to go back in time. We have to reestablish the conditions where nation states can work in harmony together. Now, having said that, that'll be necessary. Then we've got rules for behavior. The countries on the planet, once you have national control, that is the people controlling it as best as possible, because there's some cultures that this is 100 years away. And that's okay because their leadership will be under control. So you'll have nations that have a natural predisposition to people power, democratically based, meaning not democratic system, but democratic as in the source of the sovereignty is the people. Ideally, a republican system. To have a number of the Western nations can come to this constitutional republican model very, very quickly. Others a little slower. Either way, you'll have the people in charge in one band of countries, and you'll have a controlled leadership in the other. It's just the way it has to be. Because if they don't play nice, it won't be the United Nations, because the good nations on the planet that are working in in concert together, will isolate and crush any nation that decides to go back to the old way of doing business. So you've got the people in charge, or you've got governments under control. National interest must predominate. Now, on top of that, in order to create a new understanding globally, what might be smart, for example, is to have nations that wouldn't necessarily be aligned establish a relationship. Think of sister cities, which is a nonsense sort of idea, really. But imagine, I'll speak for Australia. Australia establishes a link with Malaysia, let's say. And so we have close ties with Malaysia. Throw in a European nation as well, say Germany. And say Germany, Malaysia, and Australia, we have a special relationship. Now, this is designed to establish understanding and communication with countries that otherwise would never talk to each other. And when you don't talk, there are misunderstandings. And when you have misunderstandings, you have fights. And the whole purpose is to start to reestablish the planet in such a way that we don't establish the conditions for war, which is what the cabal has done quite intentionally since forever. As to the economy, jumping quickly to the economy, Chuck is dead right. This is Trump's wheelhouse. Pay attention to what the big fella's doing, because he knows how to make it work. Now, having said that, once we get these national countries focused on their national interest, once again, their national wealth comes into play. And this talks to currency. Africa, richest continent on the planet. They can have diamond-backed currency. They can have silver-backed. It doesn't matter what it is. They'll have their currency backed by hard assets. And that's the way every nation has to go. Their currency set backed by their assets. That's absolutely necessary. Fractional reserve banking is now gone. We have every currency backed by assets. Now, here's an interesting one with crypto. Crypto, our view is, you can do what you like with your money. It's your money. Do what you like with it. However, crypto has the potential to threaten the national sovereignty through the control of it, through the influence of its economy. And here's the problem with crypto. If you don't know who's controlling it, what the hell are you buying and what's it being used for? One of the wealthiest men on the planet said, if you knew who actually owned Bitcoin and what it was used for, you'd be throwing it away immediately. And there's a bit of a clue there about who's using it and for what reason. And so, yeah, look, people are free to use their money. However, crypto isn't this panacea for currency problems. It's a trick made by people who have set it up to make money on the bunch of people who don't know what to do with their money. And when my view of Trump's statement that crypto, America will be the capital of crypto of the world, he's not saying buy crypto, not by a long shot. He's saying be careful, because we're going to crush crypto that doesn't help the national economy, and anything that comes in the form of a threat to a nation is a threat to this country, and we will crush it. And I've said once before, and I think the rules will change. The lads will be leashed and let off the leash, and they'll turn up to a boardroom and they'll frog march the chairman of the board and the board members off to prison. The world has to change. There's some fundamentals here, but the economy is once the economies get running, and once the African nations get their economies running as well, and there's some tremendously powerful, charismatic, intelligent, influential leaders in Africa, and once the French get booted out, that'll be a good start for Africa as a whole. And once those corrupted nations and their leadership are recalibrated as to a better way of doing business, then the country, every nation is going to be fabulously wealthy, because we're not ripping trillions of dollars out of the national economies to build dams. We're not ripping out trillions of dollars and handing them to the Committee of 300, etc. And so there's going to be a tremendous level of wealth, not overnight, but all of a sudden there won't be the poverty mentality that most individuals in most countries have, because we should all be very comfortable. The value of things will rise, the cost and price will drop, because the grasping corporations which create scarcity and then jack up their prices will be gone. The balance of what you need to survive will shift dramatically. And so less poverty, more self-reliance on a very individual level, and then regional and state and national level. So each nation will be tremendously self-reliant to the maximum possible ability of that nation. Countries like Singapore, nothing in terms of national resources, but a geostrategically critical place for shipping, etc., which means that's what it'll be leaning on, as it has done since Lee Kuan Yew took over. Tariffs, Brilliant. The External Revenue Service, I think it's a great idea. It's another great way to exclude those countries that decide not to play by the new rules, which is don't go breaking our hearts. Be nice, do the right thing. That doesn't mean that they can, like China does at the moment, harvest organs from those who are the ethnic Chinese Muslims and harvest for the halal transplant market in the Middle East. They harvest organs from the Falun Gong because they meditate, they eat well, they're healthy, their bodies are great. And so if China wishes to continue that sort of work, it'll be shut down fast. And the lie that is China, and China is a massive lie, is going to, again, great brutality followed by great kindness. But the brutality's got to come first. You get them on their knees until they are begging to be treated well, and then we will. And they have to concede. So this will be an interesting period of history for humanity. Thankfully, the leadership of most countries is under control, and we won't be facing, we as a nation, as a globe, won't be facing intractable international problems. The problem will be how quickly can we get people off their knees and into a self-reliant situation where they can look after themselves, they can govern themselves, and we can, again, at the risk of sounding like a big Nick, live in peace and harmony between nations. It's doable, because what people have to realize is, for the longest time, all of these wars have been manufactured. All of these wars have been the desire of the cabal. All of these wars have been fake. And as the soldiers, all of us have had military experience. Nobody hates a war more than a soldier, but the soldier also knows once war is joined, there's only one option, that's to win. And what we're trying to do is prevent that happening. So we'll still have the capacity to deliver lethal force on behalf of our nations, but it'll be far less often. And with economic growth and national control of the countries, we can have a very different planet. This is the new world, but not the one the bad guys ordered.
Thank you. Just a couple of quick follow-up comments and questions. We'll take this dialogue around the board. En route to what you've just defined, that's beginning to take place. If you fast forward a number of years, which countries, if any, do you see right now as the biggest obstacles to attaining where we're heading? The mainstream media narratives and circles will pinpoint Russia and China as the biggest obstacles, while there are issues with China to be concerned about. Which country or countries, if any, do you think will become a big problem in this global alliance, taking a nation state view first to be the obstacle?
I don't think we'll have any obstacles from nation states. We'll have obstacles from groups within certain countries, and the biggest obstacles will just be the physical difficulty of raising nations who have neither the culture, the education, the language to develop and grow their economies to a point of independence. That's the challenge. It's the practical implementation. I don't think we're going to have countries, national leaderships, that are going to cause us problems, and if they are, they'll be very minor. No. It's like taking a bunch of, and at the risk of sounding insulting, but it's true, taking a bunch of kindergarten children and saying, right, we're going to take you to your SATs next week. You just can't do it that quickly. I was recently watching an interview by an African interview, where the gentleman was talking to two young people who were having the typical whinge about, the white man's bad. And he says, really? Well, what's in your language, what is the word for maintenance? And they didn't have it. And he said, well, of course you don't. That's why the British left us railways, the British left us houses, the British left us these magnificent buildings, and look, they're all falling apart. Why? Because we don't have a word for maintenance. Why? Because our houses don't need maintaining. They're made out of grass and sticks, and when they fall down, we build a new one. So this is his words. If we don't have the concept, how can we possibly live that concept? And so it's the implementation of this concept of what nation states should be in their own time, in their own way, with their own history. But it's a cultural shift, and anybody that's done change management in consulting, it is the single most challenging thing to do, because there's only one thing harder than getting a new idea into somebody's head. That's getting an old idea out. Hence, when we're talking about timeframes here, and it's not unlike the flight from Egypt of the Hebrews, 40 years to get from where to where. No, 40 years for the generations who lived as slaves to die. And so the people that entered that new country had no history of slavery. Now, I'm not suggesting, that's a good plan or a bad plan. I'm just saying that's the reality. What's going to take time is this idea where grandpa used to live in a grass hut and didn't know what maintenance meant, to young black children who now have the language and definitional concepts living in their heads so they can actually start to build their nations. So we're talking multi-generational plan here. And so once again, back to your question, what are the challenges? It's not going to be like China's a challenge. Not at all. Because the Chinese leadership will be under control and they know what's good for them, because we've got good old Uncle Sam that's going to do exactly to them what they did to Iran if they don't behave. Russia, a natural ally of the West. Not a problem with Russia. And so we shouldn't be looking at which country's a problem. It's how we're going to implement these generational changes as equitably as possible to allow humanity to prosper. Look, it's just the most exciting time to be alive. It really is. It's brilliant. It's like a constitutional republic. Everybody has the right, except some people lack the capacity. And so it behoves those of us who have more capacity to be additionally kind and generous to help those stand up on their own 2 feet. We do it as individuals in our own country, and we'll do it as countries to other countries that need that boost. Now, that doesn't mean we sacrifice our own country for their good. They have to work, they have to sweat, they have to bleed, they have got to get their calluses. They've got to do the work. But we'll be assisting them do that, and that will underpin this economic success, which is the lack of which is the cause of a lot of hardship and misery. That economic success will grow. They will own it. It will be theirs. They'll be proud of it, and we'll be able to have the most remarkable planet that it's ever been.
Great analysis and foresight into where we're heading, and I appreciate everything that you've brought to the table. One quick question before one comment to our viewers. Ricardo Bossie just talked about nations versus an international or globalist sort of a view. And that's exactly what President Trump, as I'll remind our viewers, said on the floor of the United Nations when he became president the first go around, 2017-16. He said, "Make America great again, sovereignty of our nation, take care of our people. You should do the same," he told the entire people of the United Nations. And then he balanced out the rest of that speech. And that's in part one of the things you touched on, and I wanted to bring that to the surface. So the same question going over to, I don't know if Michael Jaco is still with us. The screen looks frozen. If Mike is with us, he'll activate or come back in. Here's the question set up. If Mike takes it, fine. If not, we'll go on to Derek Johnson. We began talking about the geopolitical realignment, its impact, who's a friend, who's an enemy, and its impact economically and so forth. So Michael, if you're with us, activate, join in. If not, Derek, can you take that question on for us, please? Looks like we'll go to Derek.
Well, so, it always goes back. I was trying to look at something on my phone to see if I could find it, but way back, it was been around 2017, somewhere in there. There was a little kind of like, it was like an example piece, which was really cool because it was kind of it like if someone would have tripped on it like I did per se, or which I was looking for it, but if someone would have tripped on it and found this via Google somehow, whatever it could have been, like when they were doing their search, it was a piece from OFAC, so your Office of Foreign Control Assets and things like that. So Foreign Assets Control. It was a piece where it was like if you get scammed, then blah, 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 blah. And it was showing this example of what they would say to you. All right. Well, it was a proof that there was a global reset coming. And it showed this very well. So getting into like our, who's going to be what, who's not. When you look at what President Trump did, this still ties into your currencies and what's going to happen in the future. President Trump was the first foreign leader to walk into the forbidden city of China in 500 plus years. So there's China. We got them. There's the stick. All right. Also, Modi from India praising him like he did. Also, he was the first. He gave the trophy to the sumo wrestler, which is the emperor's job. He was the first to walk in North Korea. Remember all that? Oh, he's going to start a nuclear war with his temperament and all this other stuff. He walked in front of the queen. All right. Also, he pushed all those people out of the way at the NATO summit. All of those nations. So all of these nations are not a problem. The global reset, if you will. Now, I have some people that I know that they thought when they bought all this dinar and this, that, and other, that they're going to be trillionaires. You couldn't be any more wrong. And I've been trying to tell them over and over and over again, like if that were the case, then everybody would be what? Lazy after that. We're not getting rid of, our barter system. I agree with Colonel Sellers there, with the fiat and whatnot, because when I went to, and I talk against institutions, but President Trump's already said also colleges and high schools that don't teach our history in the future and they don't teach what's going on, they'll be defunded. All right. So when money talks, I will say this. My dad always says money talks and bullshit walks. All right. So whenever your money is taken from you, you will get in line pretty quick. So that's going to take place as well. So when you look at an institution, when I did my master's degree of business at Colorado State University, libtard nation, so they have to claim me. That's why I always give them a shout out. But one of my professors, conservative, holds up a $1 bill, $1 bill in the class, very first class. He says, "What is this?" And everybody's hands are raised. Everybody has a pretty decent answer because most everybody in there is 28 years old to 60 years old. All right, but one buddy of mine specifically nailed it right on the head. Control, right? It's control. I mean, I make jokes all the time. Colonel Sellers, he knows exactly what I'm about to say down here in the South. What if we made a pine cone our next form of barter? Colonel Sellers and I would be pretty filthy rich because there's a ton of pine cones down here. All right, so we've always had a barter system in place. But I think everybody needs to focus on what's taking place with the currency, the Indo-Pacific Agreement, every nation on their own, what President Trump did capitulation-wise, and then also look at all the nations who dumped the U.S. dollar. All right, so there's that. The crypto stuff, the Bitcoin stuff, any of that, first off, it's been used as a tracer. All right, so there was that as well. So it's like Lieutenant Colonel Bossie said right there about the whole, being in control. All right, same thing with AI. AI it can be good when it's good. It's going to be bad when it's bad. It's only going to be bad if it's not in our hands, in the good guys' hands. All right, so President Trump has to be delicate, obviously, with where we are with today's what? These right here. All right, because we're not leaving technology. So we're not leaving technology. That means we have to do what? We have to establish a set standard on how we're going to run and operate this. So recently, some people that I know and Brad know, they were kind of upset with the whole Social Security thing. And I said, this shows where people listen and who don't listen. All right. Social Security is a great example for the future of what's taking place, but especially for Americans who will be listening to this. Social Security, right? My mom and dad and my grandparents paid in that their whole life. It's out of their hands. They can't walk to a certain building and say, I want my money back that I paid in for the last 55, 60 years. They can't do that, right? And everybody, I mean, I guess you technically could if everybody demanded that and they knew what building to go to and whatnot, if we were still in that, hypothetically speaking. But showing an analogy here, you can't walk up and demand your money back. You can't find this particular person, place, thing, right? So this money's been paid into. The article specifically said that President Trump signed an executive order for 10 years that only the federal government will have control of AI for the next 10 years. All right, so then you got to go back to this. You have two options. Either you love President Trump, you support President Trump, you trust President Trump, all right, who also is a businessman, again, like Colonel Sellers just said. I mean, come on, the guy he wasn't a politician, he was an outsider. All right, the term bankruptcy for all the little low-level people out there, that's a business term. That don't mean he was bankrupt in his personal life. So here you have this expert in the business field who's been talking about China for the last 45 years, older than me, longer than me, an expert on China. All right, so you have all these things that set up. All right, so Social Security. In this article, it specifically said, and I saw all these people all over the internet getting all riled up, mad, and they didn't read one simple little thing. And this is what colonels and lieutenant colonels, but officers and generals really harp on in the military. Pay attention to detail. Pay attention to detail. It said that your information, people's information, contact information, all right, information is with 3 agencies. And President Trump is going to take it out of those 3 agencies and put it into 1 agency. How in the hell are people getting upset, mad at they're going to have our information? They already have your information. All right. So do you trust President Trump, or do you want it to go back to the swamp who had this Social Security all these years and was taking money here and here, and it was in this unified budget? They put the aviation funds and the highway funds and all these funds together, right? So we have this conundrum. We have this, what we call a cluster, we won't say the word, but everybody who's ever seen Heartbreak Ridge with Clint Eastwood, you'll know what I'm talking about. We have this cluster, All right, President Trump, they've had to go in here and do all these things. So a lot of the crypto has been a tracer. The gold-backed digital currency. All right, we left the gold standard in 68. We have to have something that backs our assets because, again, we make this piece of paper valuable. We make it as valuable as we want it or as invaluable as we want it. So, again, we could take a pine cone and make it the trade and then say, okay, your dollar ain't worth doo-doo anymore. That piece of paper is not worth anything. So you have to have a form of backup. All right, that brings in your Federal Reserve, that brings in your Treasury. President Trump just recently announced the $160 trillion that no one knew about. $160 trillion? That's a lot of dang money. All right, so they're telling you that they've taken the system back over. We found all our gold. We retrieved it. That's why the Fort Knox thing was such a humorous thing with Elon and the brick. And is it a brick, painted gold, or is it really gold? All right, so all this stuff's going to come into a position of, once again, of wealth, but wealth for all of us, not wealth like people thought when they bought all these cryptos and they bought all this dinar and all these other things. That's people thinking selfishly, and sometimes not in a bad selfish. I'm not knocking my friends out there, but again, that's thinking selfishly versus thinking wealth for the world and wealth for the planet and getting rid of all this bullcrap systems we've all been under.
Great points, Derek. Thank you. Quick comments. 160 trillion. I want to dive into that at another time with you. Fort Knox. I want to dive into that at another time. And the crypto conversation. I was told by Juan 07 a long time ago, and this was publicly broadcast, not just personal conversations, that crypto itself was and is a black hat operation. And on the comments of Dinar and Zim, I've got friends too. A Vietnam vet, Fifth Special Forces unit, good friend, a hero of mine, who sadly has dumped a fortune into dinars, and I've tried to direct him to better sources. The Zim situation and the dinar, also Juan has put the kibosh on that for anyone who respects Juan's wisdom. Thank you, Derek. Great points raised. And a quick comment, I spoke to one of my producers, Mike Jaco, lost signal, and we want to thank Michael for his contributions to the panel and look forward to Michael returning next broadcast. So our last question that, Brad, you've been patiently once again listening to, we're talking about the geopolitical shuffle, who's our friend who isn't, obstacles within, if any, and the whole currency situation. How would you like to weigh in on this before we conclude with an open floor discussion?
Well, the Canadian got it right this time. I unmuted before. It's amazing. I can actually learn things, right? And patience is a virtue. That's what we all got, eh? Derek talks about pine cones. We should do a maple syrup. Back in the day, I might have said beer, but then I went over to Germany, and my goodness, they kind of locked it down there with the pints. I know Colonel Sellers and likely Ricardo Bossie will agree. I'm just going to kind of answer the latter first and work myself back, John, if that's good for you. So,
okay, sure, whatever works.
2000. Thank you. In 2009, satellites were done by there was a satellite. I can't name the agency, but Google and also the U.S. government did a report where they investigated the sovereign wealth of 209 nations using ground-penetrating radar to look at what the resources were within each one of those nations. Now, let me just take a moment and dovetail, or go on a tangent rather. President Eisenhower, as we now know, and we've had multiple shows with Laura Eisenhower, some of the other men here on the panel have gotten to know her, have had shows with her, and then in FOIA requests, it's come out. he looks like he was the one who established the White Hat military alliance. Because if you remember back in the day, he was the one who very first warned about the military industrial complex within the United States. Then he briefed President JFK. So I'll do this quick summary. President Eisenhower, it very much appears, is the one who established the White Hat military alliance. Derek's already alluded to the PEDs and setting up the capability for a continuity of government, because the enemy was within the gates and the enemy was a hidden enemy. We saw President Trump state that as 45. We are from the podium at the White House to the press corps. We are fighting an invisible enemy. So let's go back now to this 2009 survey that Google project to use satellites and kind of look at all of the in-ground assets of all the sovereign nations. Now, in my partaking with the Alliance of Indigenous Nations, their Zoom calls and interfacing with a number of them and the tribes, they have actually figured out within certain territories the value of these and are asking for it from a reparation standpoint. Do I believe they're going to get that from the governments? No. But when we look back to January of this year, before President Trump was inaugurated as 47, the U.S. Treasury let it come out that we found all of these American bonds, and there's every citizen in America has their name and information on it, and all these bonds. What are they? What do we do with it? And it kind of, like a fart in the wind, it disappeared. That is your wake-up call to the fact that, yes, the White Hats are 100% in control from the economic standpoint. And let's look at a couple more things here just of late. Cantor Fitzgerald helped lead an offering with Trump Media Group, traded on the New York Stock Exchange 2 weeks ago with Truth Plus and TruthFi. And then also Trump Media Group last week is doing a $400 million stock repurchase buyback. Now, folks, John Michael Chambers here, he definitely knows all about this because that's his original background as an investment advisor, and he knows all about this. So let me ask you this, folks. If Trump Media Group, who reported on their balance sheet last week, has got $2 billion in revenue, is doing a $400 million stock buyback because they are so bullish on the market and also on themselves, what is there really to fear overall? In addition to that, how many times has President Trump said, we are in a golden age, liquid gold beneath our feet? And we've seen Dr. Jan Halper-Hayes many times confirm to the public, who is a woman who works on contract with DOD and the Pentagon, say that all of the gold has been pulled out of the Vatican and flown back and repatriated. So now we move up to the treasury bonds aspect of this. We just saw President Trump release to the American public via Truth Social post last week. We're doing so well with the External Revenue Service. You know, any American under $200,000 of income probably won't have to pay taxes, and you'll actually be getting money back from the government. We have seen microcosmic examples of this working in nations over the last several decades. Number one, Libya with Gaddafi, right? You get married and they would give you $60,000 if you have a child, and your home was free, and they would give you $5,000 as well if you got married as a bonus. Now, that doesn't mean that you are placating a nation into saying, hey, we got universal high income, let's do nothing and sit on our backs and wax our ass. These were actually productive individuals that attained a high level of intelligence, right? They had some of the highest Qs. If you looked back to research analytics, in that section of Middle East and Africa. And here's a man who was trying to bring in an African dinar backed by gold and was negotiating through his son, Saif, in the capital with the Rothschilds in the city of London to make it happen. Interesting what they did there to take them out and kind of turn the tables. Now, I'm not saying that he was a great guy, a good guy, a bad guy. I don't know. But you can look at all of those indicators. We see what President Nayib Bukele has done in El Salvador. We see what Milei is doing in Argentina. And we see the people respond to the fact that they are taking the stress of the financial burden off of themselves, knowing that great times are ahead and nearly there. And it's actually given tangible evidence to them. So when we look at all the other nations around the world, as well as what President Putin is doing, which rarely gets spoken about, who built 3,500 Christian churches, castrates pedophiles, and ensures there's no GMO in the foods. And you can walk through the cities of Moscow and Russia, and it's cleaner than any city in the Americas today. There's something great there. And I'm not, again, supporting the man himself, because I personally don't know. We definitely know some of his history that's been published, and it's not too great. But overall, we see this renaissance throughout the world, and that, I think, will trickle down, because it's up to every man, woman, and young adult to demand that they have the same in their countries, in their sovereign nations, and that they take a stand. They need to stand up. You cannot be complacent. When it goes back then, John, to your next point in your question, with who do we have to worry about, state actors on a geopolitical sense, I feel that's what we've got to worry about internally in each one of the nations. You just look at Canada, for example. They just announced last week in Edmonton, Alberta, of all places, a $75 million loan, non-recourse, to build the largest elementary school for Muslim kids in the nation. Yet we have native reservations in Canada where they can't get clean water. And we also have, storming around multiple cities, guys carrying machetes, screaming death to anybody who doesn't believe in their ideology. And I'm not even talking about the woke pedophile drag queens, right? Because they're all a whole bunch of, PUSSYs for the most part. We're talking about radicalized men who are walking around screaming they will kill you. And those are the ones we have to worry about in every nation. Those are the ones who are also have that kind of trigger, ready, set, go, in case some of their other guys get taken out. So I think those cells have to be rooted out everywhere. That's what we have to be vigilant upon. And that's what it's all up to all of us to come together as a community, form your communities, have your backup plans just in case, but don't do so out of fear. Just do so out of preparedness, right? Canadian Army taught us the 7 rules of proper previous planning prevents piss poor performance. So if you just follow that and you make sure that you focus on the light, you focus on the heart. I'll tell you one more thing, so I turn it back here. I just interviewed the original creator of the Canadian Freedom Convoy. This is a man that barely, nobody knows his name, but they're still hunting him in Canada. So he had to flee the United States and file for political asylum. This is the man who orchestrated it, that they want with a vengeance to throw in jail for 15 years and pull a Pastor Artur Pawlowski, which is where they were bribing, the guards were bribing inmates to murder Pastor Artur and other hundreds of Canadian political prosecuted prisoners still today in prisons because they stood up for the Freedom Convoy. We also have to root that out across the judicial system, law enforcement. Hopefully it doesn't exist in many of our militaries anymore, but we shall see. So I think that is the greatest threat, along with AI as an existential threat to all of mankind. We cannot also turn our deductive reasoning and our cognitive skills to something that just gives us an answer. We go, oh, well, that's what this said, because it was programmed by something. We have to make sure we harness it as a tool, like we did at BlackBerry when I was working at BlackBerry, and it's a tool for us. It comes with an on-off switch. The same thing like we're talking to each other on these boxes right now. And overall, I guess, to summarize this, John, and leave it here, it's up to each man and woman and child to step into their own power. This is what it's all about. We look at God's light in the words of Jesus, Yahshua, who came before us, right? And you have to love thyself first while you're also loving the Creator. And if every individual, man and woman, can become spiritually awake to the beauty and love within themselves and step into their own power, then they become the sovereign soul, not a dead corporate entity, and they can actually have a voice and speak on authenticity, demand things, take a stand, and also come together as a community, a tribe, or even a nation and create greatness, unleash greatness, because greatness awaits them, like Ricardo's book cover says in the background.
Great words of truth closing out there, Brad. Thank you. And wonderful dot connecting along the way from the beginning. And the subject of AI, I believe once we get past certain elements of the dangers that lie before us, which we didn't focus on too much this episode, but we had in the past. Once we get through that and Save Israel for Last is behind us and so forth and so on, I'd love to delve into a good segment of AI with this panel because it is a big problem. And lastly, you spoke about the internal. Your concern, if I understood you correctly, isn't necessarily a specific nation or so forth being an obstacle en route to world peace, if you will. It's more of the internal threats within each and every sovereign nation, and I think that is spot on. So thank you very much for your contributions, folks. We've got a little bit of time left. If you can stay with us, it's really up to you at this point. Open panel discussion. Is there anything you'd like to weigh in on? What we've talked about, bring something completely out of left field if that's what it is. Anything you'd like to bring up as a point of discussion briefly. We'll go around. I'll take a back seat and then we'll conclude and wrap up the show. So speak freely. Anybody that would like to bring up anything that we haven't touched on yet, or just your closing comments to wrap up this episode.
Well, I'll go real quick. The comment that we had when we had talked about the Los Angeles being the riots in Los Angeles, that being the first shot fired in the bigger picture of what's going on right now. And then I mentioned that there were these other cities, and the report that I had listened to just in the last few days was a pretty good analysis. But the bottom line of the analysis was the people that were talking were saying that it was one of the main keys of how they stopped the riots from even starting in the other cities was partially due to off-world intelligence. And the reason I bring it up is because I think there might be credence to that, because it's technology that's probably above our technology, but it allowed them to be able to forestall any actions in those other cities by groups and individuals that were designated to do something bad. And the reason I bring it up is because I have personal experience with off-worlders. I've been visited several times, and it was extensive. I mean, it was the first night that 8 of them walked through the wall in my living room, and we talked for the next 2 hours before they left. Then the next day, they sent another one back, and he spent 8 to 10 hours with me, I want to say. And on the walls in one of the bedrooms, he basically it was like a movie that he laid out. And without any words or any of this stuff, it was just showing me, and I was understanding, he was helping me understand telepathically what's going on. But it was the complete history of the earth from the beginning all the way through until now. And this went on for, I want to say, 10 hours. He came back the next day, continued with it some more. And then, so, I mean, it was a really kind of emotional thing for me to have these people in the house. I mean, they were humanoid and everything. One of them looked a lot different. I think she might have been Canadian, just from her face shape and the color of her hair and everything. But that all happened, and that was only about two to 3 years ago when this all happened. Changed my viewpoints on a lot of things. And I've seen ships. The ships I have pictures of some of them. And so I think when they make that analysis that we might have had off-world help with those riots, I think that's a valid concept, and might be worth some more investigation into.
Wow, just a quick comment. Just a quick comment, Colonel Sellers, we're going to be featuring you on Conversations of Consequence. For those that know, that platform is very different from this, where we profile and highlight important voices of our time, certainly your military service and this experience that you've just shared with us. We're going to delve deeply into in up-and-coming episodes. So thank you for sharing that. Sorry, go ahead, Derek. The panel's open. I just had to comment real quick.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that because I know sometimes in the what we call the normie world, the average world, that lower level, not in a bad way, But talking what Brad's talking about, how you can unleash, what we're talking about, empowering yourself and breaking free from this control. Every one of us are out of that control. But we are all here for humanity, right? And so a lot of times when I'm talking across the country, just one single law, they'll call a conspiracy theory, and I'm like, if you call a law a conspiracy theory, you're in trouble, right?
Yeah.
I can help you, but sometimes they'll hear, here's a full bird colonel, right, one step away from a general, talking about Palladian and then the galactic world. But I was sitting at Trump Doral this past, it was in May, early May, and one of our the colonel that I brought on, Lieutenant Colonel Lennox, in the last, I met him down there. We sat and talked for hours. I mean, he was we just sat and talked for hours. And I didn't want to make him feel old, but I was like, he looks just like my grandfather. When I say identical, when I sent a picture of him to my mother, she was like, wow, it looked like her dad. I mean, he looked identical. And I think sometimes we have those two as a showing that you're also on a good path as well. Not just meeting someone who's also on the same page, but also that made me feel like I was sitting there having a conversation with my grandfather, which is very important to me. So we're sitting there at the pool at Trump Doral, and every one of us here knows about Area 51, and I'm pretty sure, Colonel Sellers, you've been there many times. Jaco has as well, and not just speaking for him, but I don't know about Brad or Lieutenant Colonel Bossie, but I've actually flown over Area 51. You even have to have clearance just to fly over that bad boy. So people who think this is so far fetched, when you want experts, right? Well, here they are. They're sitting right here, and of course we lost one in show, but here they are, and we're not the only ones, right? There's a ton more that are willing to speak. So air missile defense. Anybody who knows it, Colonel Sellers probably knows this best, but Lieutenant Colonel Bossie probably knows too. But in air missile defense, you have to identify a wing in a cloud way up in the sky, right? I have to be able to tell what kind of aircraft that is, what the weapon capabilities are in less than 5 seconds, or they call it you're dead, right? Because it's a matter of life and death like that. So, you talk about aircraft. I'm going across New Mexico a year or two ago. There was a drone flying there. You can identify a drone. Drones are very easy to identify, especially if you have that expertise. Drones, aircraft, whatever it may be. So one time I was sitting at on the Atlantic coast. I'm in my hotel, and everyone here knows about the aircraft that we have that can go invisible. You can see it, but then it can go invisible. All right, that is legit. That is authentic. That is a real aircraft that can do that. And people think that's far-fetched. But I'm sitting there, I'm watching an aircraft, boom, boom, it's gone, right in front of my eyes. All right, then down here at Trump Doral just a couple months ago, well, a month ago now, we're sitting there, and it just so happened, I was like, Colonel, look up. And it was an aircraft, unidentified object. So when people hear UFO, they don't even realize it just means unidentified object. But when you can identify, right, I'm sitting there looking, it's way beyond the magic eye, right? Everybody but standing there couldn't see it but he and I. I got a photo of it, and I was able to slow it down and move it back and forth. And you can see how shiny it is, and then you can see its spear kind of magnify for a moment there. That is not a regular aircraft. That is not a drone whatsoever. All right. So I believe that throughout all this, everything is also unleashing. I believe as we move into the future, people are going to see things that they thought was just so far-fetched, but not scary. Nothing scary at all. But I think I wanted to say that just because so many people hear that and they'll try to go, oh, these guys are crazy and all these other things. And I'm like, you just know a very, very, very minimum of what you think of military. Very minimum. All right. When you get into special operations and you get into our allies, we have a lot of allies, not just regular allies.
May I add something to that, brother?
Oh, yeah.
It's important for the people in the world and those watching us to first acknowledge that you don't know anything that you don't know, right? And once we do that and we come at it from a place of humility and surrender, then we look at things differently. So Colonel Sellers and I, we've shared on a show the photos that he has taken. when Derek and I were in Truth Tour, right? We were in Cheyenne, Wyoming, September 27, 2022. F-16s, F-16s going right ahead. That was thanks to Juan O'Savin and National Command Authority, or President Trump at the time. And then it was C-130s, and then 5 hours straight, Blackhawks right over us, 100 feet off the deck, in a residential area in Cheyenne, Wyoming, at the Kiwanis Community Center, which is right on I-25, north and south. So everybody can look at that. That's why I gave those coordinates. Gina from the Truth Tour, she showed me all of the auras that she had taken pictures of and filmed for 1 hour in Florida, and the space gates opening. Well, Derek knows where Horsetooth Reservoir is in Fort Collins. We have seen for 3 nights in a row the same thing happening in these phenomenon, that's all I'll just keep calling it, coming back and forth. And Juan spoke to us at the end of Truth Tour in Anaheim, California in 2022. And he not only did he claim, I have the greatest access to President Trump beyond Scavino, on stage, on record, all recorded in video, he also said that I'm not going to talk right now about my company that will allow you to take a vehicle and park it near an asteroid out where in space. We're not there yet, but we're ready to go. But we're not there yet. And then he reeled it all the way back in. So I want to just share with everybody right there that there is real-time confirmation that there's so much more above, on, and then below ground that we have not been told yet, but is coming out extremely fast. And it's a beautiful time, as Rick said earlier, to be alive for this stage of the game in our ascension process as all of mankind.
What a great reveal on Juan O'Savin. Thanks for sharing that, Brad. I appreciate that very much. This is a panel conclude, but continue on this line or anything else. We'll wrap up in maybe 5 minutes or so. We haven't heard from Lieutenant Colonel Ricardo Bossie or anyone else. Just chime in. Floor is yours. This has been very engaging and very interesting.
If I could, I just want to share a slide I did for a presentation not long ago. And it speaks to the issues of AI and the incredible future ahead of us. But it's a cautionary tale, because we have just come through the COVID nonsense, and everybody willingly grasped this nonsense. And it was basically like a bit of an IQ test, who passed. And now we've got AI, and people are throwing themselves blindly into this AI, thinking it's the greatest thing since sliced bread, which it's not, obviously. And again, it's a tool. You use it, you don't use it, but people tend to be lazy, and there's a trajectory that we have just missed. Thank goodness, thanks to DJT, the White Hats, and forces beyond most people's comprehension that you've been speaking about tonight. But if I could just quickly share screen, please, John, just so people know that whilst this is a military roundtable, it's not a bunch of military deadheads that know how to squeeze triggers. Because it is imperative that all of us to look into the future to avoid the pitfalls. Now, that's been done in large measure for us.
Can we go? All right. We got it, sir.
Okay. So, again, the setup here is that we have to start thinking. We can't afford to stop thinking just because somebody's done the heavy lifting. As I said, it's incumbent upon us to build this new world. The White Hats have saved it. Well, we have to build it. Now, here's a trajectory that we were going to be on, and thankfully we're not. But let me just go through it. I've built a model. It's massively imperfect, but you'll get where I'm going with this. Agrarian age, we learned to grow crops. Brilliant. Metallurgical age, metals. Mechanical age. Production age. You can see it's linear, but you'll see where we're heading. The allopathic age, fake medicines. Genetics age, where we began to understand the human genome. The digital age, ones and zeros, away from the analog. And this is now within the last few of these have been in our lifespan. Robotics age. Artificial intelligence age, and that's where we're hitting hard against now. I want to keep advancing, and you'll see how dangerous this becomes. The transhuman age, the hive mind age, and the soulless age. There's one after that, the God Search Age. Now this is, let me just, what do I got here? Is this just evolution, maybe? The model is elegant, helpful, but inaccurate because it looks like it's sequential, but it's not. It's not really sequential. Testing was done to determine our vulnerabilities a long time ago. The solar age kicked off with evolution, atheism, and a godless universe. Darwin knew that his thesis that random mutation and survival of the fittest could lead to the creation of new species, on the origin of species, not fine-tuning, but the origin of species. And that was false. He knew it was false, and they're still teaching it at school. But this was the beginning of the godless age, the godless universe. So you can see it's not actually sequential. The transhuman, poison injection, Spanish flu, 1918. This was the beginning of testing of the human body to see what worked and what didn't work, how it could be controlled. The hive mind age, brainwashing, propaganda through Edward Bernays, who was Sigmund Freud's nephew, who was the godfather of brainwashing and advertising. The hive mind. And then you've got the solar age, destruction of the pineal gland through COVID shots and the calcification through fluoride in the water, for example. And so it's not sequential, but it's a useful tool just to see what's being done to us. Now, if you have a look at that, you think, well, it's odd. But this is where we would have headed. The transhumanism being better than, more human than human. And you can thank Yuval Noah Harari and his other soulless individuals, mindless individuals, thinking that we're just, drugs and games and we'll keep them quiet. Actually, he wants to kill us. This is Yuval Noah Harari from the World Economic Forum. The transhumanism, the hive mind where you cease to think for yourself, courtesy of the injections, 5G and other transhumanist processes being imposed upon us. And eventually we would lose our connection with the Almighty completely. We become soulless and we'll travel the universe for billions of years looking for God. And that's the God search age. Now, this might sound like nonsense, but this is a very realistic trajectory. And it's one that, thankfully, from our perspective, that has been avoided. But, ladies and gentlemen, at the risk of being insistent, we must think for ourselves. We must create this new world. We cannot hand over our sovereignty in any way to anybody but ourselves, and certainly not to AI, because it can make your writing sound like Ernest Hemingway. And so this is just a cautionary tale. This is where they want to take us. And this is where we have been fighting what we're fighting to avoid. So there you go. I just wanted to share that get into people's minds how dangerous these trajectories can be.
Fascinating and brilliant layout there, and getting everybody's minds to think outside of the box that everyone's been referring to here in this episode. And thanks, Colonel Sellers, for taking us into these corners by opening up your experience and so forth. What I'd like to do now, just because we're going to wrap up the show. I know it's late for everybody there. It's early for me here in Thailand. First off, I want to thank you all very much for your time and expertise. And as Derek has stated several times throughout the broadcast, these are experts. These are military minds with incredible experience, trying to break down and make sense of the madness of everything that's going on around us in these PSYOP wars that we're engaged in. And I sure as hell hope you found this extremely valuable and share the heck out of it everywhere, because the truth will set us free. And I think you've heard a lot of truths here. Let's go around, start with Brad. We'll go around this way. Best way for people to reach out to you and follow your podcast and your work, Brad.
Yeah, certainly. Thank you, John. I appreciate it. And I'll first lead with a message for anybody. And you might know the quote from Gandhi: "Be the change you wish to see in the world." The path is already there. You've heard from these incredible warriors of light and these men who are still serving with the truth in their voice, and whom I see as the Commander-in-Chief of Australia. And I think it's just a matter of time until that's publicly made known. And he's definitely got my vote if we can vote for anything. The best way to reach me at the moment is on Rumble at The Sovereign Soul. That is rumble.com/C for channel/The Sovereign Soul. Still don't have a website, but we did launch a humanitarian project called stepintoyourpower.com. That's all free there as well if you'd like to join that community. And that's it. And it's an honor and a pleasure to be here with you and your team, John. Thank you for what you do as well. Thank you,
Thank
gentlemen.
you.
God bless.
Thank you, Brad, for your great contribution. Derek Johnson, best way for people to follow you?
And I'll say a little message too. If you do have an animal out there, especially a dog, be the person your dog thinks you are. All right. Have you ever noticed how much a dog just runs up to you no matter what? They lick it. You could have had the worst day of your life and your dog's wagging its tail when you come home. Right. So be the dog be the person the dog thinks you are. But yeah, my best is probably Linktree because there's so many fake profiles out there. The best thing to find is just all my links on my Linktree. So linktr.ee/1776 Nation, and that pulls up all my links. So yeah.
Thank you, Derek. I'm trying to bring up this picture of one of my golden retrievers that my wife just sent me. So I'm going to try and be the person my dog thinks I am. His name is Liberty, and his sister's name is Victoria. I'm a big dog lover. All right. Thank you, Derek. Follow Derek Johnson and Lieutenant Colonel Ricardo Bossie. Best place for everyone to follow your brilliant and incredible body of work that you're doing for your country and for all of humanity.
Yeah, thanks, John. www. You got to put the W's in. Australia One Party, as you can see up there, Australia ONE Party, PRTY.com. And you can get all our social media links on that site to watch all the videos. There's, I don't know, thousands of hours of interviews there covering many, many years. But on top of that, for those of you interested in kicking off a nationalist movement in your country, you can use any of the resources we've got on our site to help you set yourselves up. We've already got people in the Philippines. Scotland One has recently been set up, I understand. There's a whole bunch of people that like what we're doing. And what we do is we just put it out there and you can use it to your heart's content. So please feel free. Take control of your destiny. Take control of your lives. Take control of your nation. Because we're about to enter a pretty, what did Benjamin Franklin say? Nice republic you've got there if you can keep it. Because I'm going to tell you, it's going to be hard work. More will be demanded of you than you can imagine. Less football and beer and more reading the Federalist Papers, for example, to really get a grip of what's going on. Because the readers are going to be the leaders, and they're going to know how to run the show. So you better make sure you're one of them. So and thanks, John. It's been an absolute privilege and pleasure to be here amongst these incredible men.
Thank you very much, Lieutenant Colonel Ricardo Bossie. And I love that, hearing that Scotland One or this one, the spreading of your leadership skills and proven leadership skills that the world desperately needs. So please follow everybody on the panel, as well as Colonel Sellers. Is there a platform, a place or that anyone can visit you and your body of work? If not, folks, come listen to Conversations of Consequence coming up soon. But go ahead, sir.
I don't have a podcast yet, but we are working on that as we speak. In the interim, you can email me at charles.sellers87
Thank you very much. And to our viewers, Conversations of Consequence is something I launched many years ago at American Media Periscope. I've resurfaced it and have been interviewing a lot of different folks. Everyone on this panel, including Mike Jaco, will be featured. I've got Dr. Sherry Tenpenny coming up and Derek Johnson's coming up, both separate. They're always private episodes coming in July, one with Derek, one with Dr. Sherry Tenpenny, my good friend, and everyone else on this panel will make their way into that as well, and I appreciate it. And right now you can view Conversations of Consequence at johnmichaelchambers.com. Up there is the most recent one with General Paul Vallely. I want to thank our esteemed panel very much for joining us. I'll be right back to wrap up the show in just a minute or so. We are at war, and we must unite in truth. Subscribe for free at johnmichaelchambers.com for my monthly communique, which includes alerts, warnings, announcements, and access to my most valuable resource network to help you to navigate this storm. With your free subscription, you will also receive a digital copy of one of my books, Trump and the Resurrection of America, an Amazon 5-star rated book and 6-star rated by the late Robert David Steele. Won't you join me as we take our country back and redirect humanity on this much-needed course correction? Remain informed, empowered, and connected, and subscribe today at johnmichaelchambers.com. All right, once again, I want to thank our esteemed guests for their time and expertise in today's panel addressing issues that concern each and every one of us, not only here in America, but all across this world. Check out the other programs that we publish by visiting johnmichaelchambers.com. Also, for notifications and my weekly communique, sign up, as we just stated, on my Rumble channel, as well as all the other platforms that I post my shows on. I got some ringing in my ear here. It's on my end. Anyway, continue to do your part. Fight for what's right, and together we will save America and redirect humanity on this much-needed course correction. Thanks for viewing this. Do your part by sharing it far and wide. Be safe, stay alert, and may God be with you.